us. We'll wait 2 minutes.
This meeting is being recorded.
To join. Oh, wow. Okay, that was loud. We'll wait 2 minutes for everyone to join us. Okay, I think we will go ahead and start. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Pramodha Weerasekera, and I'm the Assistant Curator of Education and Public Programs at the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art Sri Lanka. So we are joining here today, and on behalf of the museum, I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the third and final talk of the second edition of the Support Local Art Talk series. The project was initiated by Saskia Fernando Gallery last year in order to provide a platform for dialogue about Sri Lankan modern and contemporary art during the pandemic. As a follow-up, Saskia Fernando Gallery invited MMCA Sri Lanka to curate and host the second edition. The three talks, we curated the three talks to address the role of art in relation to community, cultural diplomacy, and humor, bringing together a group of panelists from different backgrounds and points of view. Today's talk is the final and exciting of three, and we focus on the power of humor with the panelists Dino Corera, who is a comedian, Gehan Blok, who is also a comedian, Gihan de Chickera, political cartoonist, and Sharmini Pereira, art historian and curator. And the talk will be about the relationship between art and humor, especially in the context of Sri Lanka. The talk will be moderated by me. So before we start, I would like to thank our panelists for choosing to be here today despite power cuts, despite being in different time zones, also going through a lot in their personal lives as well. We would also like to thank Nations Trust Private Banking and Saskia Fernando Gallery for their support. So I would now like to introduce you to our speakers. Dino Corera is a comedian, actor, writer, and producer. He is one part of the Sri Lankan comedy duo, Blok and Dino. He has 10 years of experience in media and radio journalism as well. He also currently heads Layup, a startup specializing in corporate training engagement. He lives and works in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Gehan Blok is a comedian, actor, writer, and producer. He's the other part of the Sri Lankan comedy duo Blok and Dino. He also specializes in digital media and was the manager and head of the digital team for Vijay newspapers before starting the social media news-based news agency W Now. He too lives and works in Colombo. Gihan de Chickera is a political cartoonist and theatre practitioner. He has been drawing political cartoons for the Daily Mirror newspaper since 2004. His work has also been featured in the podcast of Humour South Asian. In 2012, Gihan won Cartoonist of the Year at the Journalism Awards for Excellence and won a Merit Award for the same in 2015. Sharmini Pereira is the Chief Curator of the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art Sri Lanka. She's the founder and director of Raking Leaves and co-founder of the Sri Lanka Archive of Contemporary Art, Architecture and Design in Jaffna. She holds a master's degree in art history from Edinburgh University and a master's degree in curatorial studies from the Royal College of Art, London. And she currently lives and works in Sri Lanka. This talk, to introduce a little bit, talk to you a little bit about the premise of the talk. With the 4 panelists today, what we are hoping to do is to engage in a discussion about humor, especially when it's facilitated through art. It's a very rich and engaging panel. I know the panelists are going to be very rich and engaging. 3 of them are practitioners of art and humor, and Sharmini being an art historian whose main research interest is humor and contemporary art. So we will start by discussing the roles of the comedian and the political cartoonist in the context of Sri Lanka. We will also discuss the manner in which humor has been a crucial part of the response to the current political and economic crisis in the country, with many memes, videos, and cartoons using language of satire and sarcasm, often encouraging learning, unlearning, and dialogue during these difficult circumstances. The subject matter of the talk, the power of humor, is vast and has so many nuances and cannot be covered in a mere hour or so. But we hope this conversation would be a good starting point for further engagement about the subject matter. We will take audience questions in the final 30 minutes, and you're very welcome to send in your questions during the discussion as you see fit. And please keep your questions short, and we will take them in the last 30 minutes, as I mentioned before. So again, a very warm welcome and thank you to all our panelists. My first question goes to Dino. So Dino, you and Gehan have both worked in comedy across genres such as theatre, stand-up, and more recently, the hugely versatile and accessible mode of videos that are freely available online, on YouTube, on Facebook, and in order to convey various types of messaging in a comedic manner. So in a comic manner, what do you think is the role of a comedian, especially in Sri Lanka?
First off, thank you, Pramodha, for having both of us. I think I speak on behalf of Gehan in saying thank you for having us to both MMCA and Saskia Fernando Gallery. I think when you look at the role of a comedian, I think one of the biggest things, at least to me, and I think to both of us also, has been the fact that, comedy also helps people talk about a lot of things they're not comfortable talking about in an interesting and engaging way. I mean, fundamentally, when it comes to the politics, the issues of race and culture, especially in a country that's a melting pot like our own, these conversations are really important to bridge communities and also sometimes poke fun at ourselves in order to make sure that we can have a dialogue and have an engaging conversation around both our shared histories and like individual histories as cultures and as people, especially given Sri Lanka's backdrop of so many things that have happened, culturally, as well as economically, socio-politically. I think a lot of the conversations that don't happen can be somewhat had thanks to dialogue that's opened up by comedy. I think even stand-up to a great extent is sometimes a two-way conversation because you open up an audience to think about things or discuss things that they might not necessarily discuss every day or everywhere. Also, I think in a world, the kind of world we live in where opinions are becoming stronger and stronger and things like social media are really polarizing audiences, I think it's really important to make sure that there is a middle ground in kind of listening to other people and also having or being open to discussing opinions about things, simply because of the fact that sometimes people get stuck in this echo chamber, especially based on content that's served to them online and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of comedians, even internationally, are trying to break those boundaries and connect people. So that I think is something or those are a couple of things I feel are really, really important in terms of being a comedian. And I think a role of a comedian is probably walking that line and encouraging that dialogue between these kind of moving pieces and changing backgrounds, socio-politically, economically, and even personally with technology and so many other things. But yeah, I think that's my take on it.
Thank you, Dino. And I want to direct the second portion of that question to Gehan. Dino talked about how perhaps both of you look at the role of the comedian, and I feel like the moving image, the online video format has also allowed you and Dino to work well to fulfill this role. Maybe you can talk to us about the liberties you have enjoyed, as well as the challenges you have had to face when working with this form.
Hi, Pramodha. Thank you once again for having us. So to answer your question, I think in terms of the videos we do, I mean, mainly it's always for a brand. So there are certain liberties we take when it comes to the videos we do. It's not like traditional advertising, because traditional advertising has a framework. They'll say, you know, there is this, this is the framework we have. You got to play within that framework. Whereas what we do, especially with the videos we create, is that we step out of that framework usually. We try to do something different. When, for example, we did this video called Zombie Lanka, which was for like Excite batteries. And when we first pitched it to the agency basically went and pitched it to the client, and you know, there was blood and guts and gore and all of that. So it's a horror comedy genre, which, you know, usually you don't see that type of video associated with brands or like advertising, because it's gore and it's you know, it's not done. So when we first pitched it, the agency came back saying, you know, it doesn't work. The client doesn't like it. You got to write something different. But what we did was we said, no, we believe it works and it'll work. Just get us in the room with the client and we'll convince them. And we managed to do that. And because of that, we managed to shoot the video. So yeah, so we have certain liberties which we take, which the usual advertising formula or format doesn't really use. Having said that, though, we still walk the line, but we don't cross it, especially when it comes to video. And the other thing, what we have, which, like, for example, if we were in traditional media, for example, there are certain things you can do and can't do when you're on a spectrum. For example, when you're on national television, there's another framework. You're stuck within this framework. You can't move out of it. You step out of line, you could get banned. Your license could get cancelled. So we don't have any of those issues when it comes to YouTube. So those are the pros of being on YouTube. Also, you can say things. You can, like, for example, another example, a good example was when Pick Me at that point in 2019, I think, they had a huge issue where Pick Me Food couldn't even put a picture up without someone commenting, you know, something very racist or very, because Pick Me was associated as this Muslim brand. It's like this Muslim brand, everything. I mean, the client literally came to us and said, look, we can't put anything out. You know, if we put something out there, we just that it's just a whole plethora of like racist comments. That's what it was. So what we did was we took it upon ourselves and we said, look, it's a challenge for us. I think Dino and I discussed all saying this is a massive challenge, because we know as soon as we put it up, there's going to be a lot of hate, a lot of dislikes, a lot of negative sentiment towards the video. So we thought, okay, we'll give them something so funny that even if you're the most racist, bigoted, horrible human being out there, you will still you'll watch it. You may necessarily not share it or whatever because you're a bigot, but you will watch it again and again and again. And we managed to do that because the video racked up about 1 million views, I think, on Facebook, but with the less number of shares, which means people obviously, usually for a video that racks up about 1 million views, you hit about 40-50,000 shares. But for this, we had about 10,000 shares. So people are not sharing it, but they were watching it again and again and again. And we got called so many things. You know, we were called, is it okay if I use some like bad words? Okay. Okay. So we were actually called Tambinta Kadayana Ponnadena. That was like, you could filter down those comments. So we knew that was going to happen, but at the end of the day, we achieved it, and we got people to actually join because we were targeting riders for Pick Me Food, and they still use the video to promote themselves to get more riders. So those are the liberties you can take. Now, something like that could have never been done on traditional media. So those are the good things that come out of being on a platform like YouTube and doing the things we do. But also the negative side of things is you can get a lot of hate, you can get a lot of bad negative sentiment, all of those things. And also we are very dependent on YouTube. Tomorrow, if YouTube goes away, then we don't have a platform to showcase these things. So that is also there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Gehan. I think we'll come back to some of those points you made also about hate and censorship. Even on YouTube, you can get reported, videos can get reported, videos can get blocked, or your account can get suspended. So we will come to that towards the latter part of the panel as well. So I will now move on to Gihan and ask a similar question. What do you think, as a political cartoonist, is the role of the political cartoonist in Sri Lanka? It's a very big question, I know, but yes. Gihan, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Pramodha, and thank you to the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art for organizing this and inviting me for this event. When I started off as a political cartoonist, the idea that I had in my head was that I will be lampooning basically serious decisions and situations that occur in the country. But once I started getting into the practice of drawing political cartoons, what I actually realized is, in addition to, of course, the massive, like very serious, tragic events that happen in the country and on which we have to comment on, for the large part, what was happening in the political sphere was in itself very satirical. So it was this odd situation where I found myself having to, me and my colleagues at the Daily Mirror, we had to, satirize a satirical situation. And how do you do that? That was something that we continue to grapple with. Is this clear? Can this be seen?
Yes, it's clear. If you can go into the share mode, sorry, the presentation mode, yes.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me see, let me try that again.
At the bottom, next to the Zoom, zoom in, zoom out bar, Gihan?
Yeah,
on the left-hand
the
side.
thing is okay, right.
Yeah, no.
Better?
Yes, all good.
Okay. So basically, when talking about cartoons, I like this quote by Joseph Conrad, that a caricature is putting the face of a joke on the body of a truth. And I think that's something that we try to do, is basically try to reveal something that is true, using, satire, humor, not always, but most of the time. And also, I think it's kind of significant that we are talking about this in light of what happened to Salman Rushdie. And I came, one of my colleagues, Avanta Artikaler, has drawn a beautiful cartoon about that, which I thought I should share. Okay, wait, hold on. I seem to be having some technical issues. So if you see this cartoon, you will realize, the symbolism that cartoonists work with. And I think Avanta is making a very strong point here, basically using this whole idea of, the pen is mightier than the sword, and using the image of the knife, which was used to attack Rushdie in this case. So something to think about. And also, what I would urge the audience to do is just try to look at the symbolism that we use, because that's essentially what cartoonists try to do. What we try to do is we try to transcend words, and give expression to what we want to say through images and through symbolism. So I refer to this humorous situation that we face as a country politically, and I think this cartoon again by my colleague Avanta is kind of the cartoons can be seen, right, Pramodha?
Yes, we can see that.
Right, yeah. So this again is, the situation that we are in, and I think the symbolism is kind of clear to everyone who's watching, who can see this. So a technique that a lot of cartoonists use is, using well-known symbols, and this is a cartoon from Vijay Soma, also one of my favorite cartoonists. And again, he's referring obviously to the politics of the old left at the time, where they are kind of looking a bit lost in the symbol of the hammer and sickle. These are two other cartoons that I like very much, drawn by Pragit Eknaligoda. Once again, you can see the well-known image of Lady Justice, the symbolism, how the cartoonist has used that to give their message across. And as you can see, these cartoons are not necessarily funny. There is a kind of doom and gloom and heaviness to the artwork as well. And the cartoon on the right is also again about freedom of expression. Then sometimes cartoonists also use wordplay, and sorry, yeah. This is an example of that. Can the text be seen, or can it
Yes.
not be seen? It can be, okay.
Can be seen.
I'm sorry, I'm not very good with technology. So yeah, so you can see the cartoon is using a little bit of wordplay. So it's about images, but you can bring in a bit of wordplay as well. Then also we resort to famous stories, fables, parables, that kind of thing. So these are two cartoons. One is mine, one is Vijay Soma's. You can see how both cartoons refer to like parables and fables and that kind of thing. So it's just, but what I urge you all to do is just look at the symbolism as much as possible. Then here again, this is just another example of how a famous story is used to depict, give out a message, and it's also an indication of how things haven't changed very much. So there's a lasting element to cartoons as well. Then also there are certain occasions where cartoonists maybe use similar symbolism, and this happened recently when the cartoon on the left is a cartoon I drew in 2013, and the cartoon on the right is a cartoon that Avanta drew just a couple of days ago. So we sometimes you see a lot of this also, where symbolism is used by the same symbolism or similar symbolism is used by different cartoonists. Then also the same. Now these are two different cartoonists, but the same cartoonists would sometimes use hackneyed symbols. Sometimes this is an example of two cartoons 10 years apart that I drew, one in 2011 and one last year. Then another element, and I think this is an element that Blok and Dino know of very well as well, which is where the characters don't realize what's going on stage or what's happening to them, but the audience can see what's happening, and that evokes humor. So these are two examples of that, how the cartoonist can use that as well. So the character doesn't know what's going on, but we can see what's going on, and that makes it funny. So also living in Sri Lanka, and going by what I initially said about how we live in actually satirical times. Sometimes, although cartooning is a medium of exaggeration, as this cartoon would show, you don't really need to exaggerate anything at all. You can just depict you can just depict things as they are, and this is what Vijay Soma had done maybe 40 years ago. He's just showing the situation as it is. And finally, what I would like to say is also that when speaking of the role of cartooning, cartoons, I think the best cartoons have a long shelf life, and they have this kind of long-lasting element to them. And this is a cartoon that I like very much, and that I see having that element. And you can see the symbolism again, and you can see that what is being shown by Vijay Soma is still very much true and relevant to us even today. So that's it for now.
Yeah. Thank you, Gihan. I mean, I wish we could stay on and for the whole session, analyze all these cartoons.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Thank you. And thank you for shedding light on your experience and also your peers' experiences and how they've depicted, how they've engaged in this role of the political cartoonist. So I'll direct the next question to Sharmini. So Dino, Gehan, and Gihan as practitioners have expressed their views on the role of humor in Sri Lanka. Could you help us perhaps understand the role of humor more generally in relation to art?
Thank you, Pramodha. Yes, I will attempt to do that. I think, listening to Dino and Blok and Gihan, there's certainly many elements that they share across some of what they've been talking about that characterize this sort of vast era subject of humor. And perhaps generally speaking, when we experience humor, we typically view it as something that, makes us smile, makes us laugh. But as Gihan has said, it's not laughter where we're sort of falling about, on the floor laughing. But when we come to talk about humor, sort of to maybe make theories about it, I want to begin by saying that many of those who've written about humor, they all agree that nothing kills a joke, basically, like a thesis. Having to explain a joke pretty much, kills it. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to do my best to go through. I've just thought I just want to make perhaps 3 points that I think are helpful for understanding the sort of study of humor. And the first point I'd like to make is that when we think about humor, the extent to which, when we experience humor, it is dependent on culture, geography, context, and age. And if we take this first category of culture, this broad kind of category of culture, we share humor reputedly with those that share the same culture as us. Those that understand the language of that culture, the references, the topics, and that connects us. And to some extent, to this end, humor is often seen as a defining factor of a certain kind of national identity. So, we talk about British humor, and that it's not understood by Americans who don't get irony, as an example. And if we took another category, like age, it's easy for us to all understand that, kids laugh at certain things that would be very different to what a mature audience are going to find funny, and vice versa. So these 3 things of culture, geography, context, and age is something that I wanted to just put out there as the first point. The second point is that there are different kinds of humor, and our 3 speakers have already begun to kind of name them in various ways. And broadly speaking, there is no definitive list, so to say, of what these kinds of humor are. But if I was to kind of categorize them in some form, I'm just going to begin with one, which is, slapstick. slapstick humor, the style of humor that is often very much about physicality. You know, everything from clowns to mime, people who mime with facial expressions. The skits and sketches often employ this kind of slapstick humor. The second category, which is that the self-deprecating type of humor. You know, humor, this is a kind of humor that many stand-up comedians use a lot, where basically they're making fun of themselves. They are the butt of the joke, and what they're rewarded with laughs, hopefully, from the audience. Then similar to sort of that connection with theatre and stand-up or live humor is improvisational humor. And this kind of humor is often seen as really highly skilled, because it really calls on the comedian to be able to come up with the jokes, the content, you know, there and then. You know, and that's incredibly, I suppose, you know, that's a craft that really is talking to a craft there. Fourthly, and it's been mentioned by people already, is humor that works with words, wordplay. So that again kind of connects back to, you know, if you speak that language, you'll understand the wordplay. If you don't speak that language, you're outside of that humor. It involves twisting language, you know, puns, and so on. Then there's another category, dark humor, which, you know, I personally am a great fan of. You know, humor that, you know, kind of has like a little sort of sinister undertones. And it connects to me to another category to come to, which is, you know, surreal humor, kind of zany humor. And, you know, it's like looking at kind of, you know, common day things, but in a slightly kind of illogical fashion, absurdity, etc. Like Monty Python would be a really, really good example of that kind of humor. And then lastly, just, you know, I put this list together, as I say, there's not really a definitive list, is satire. Under which I think so many things come, and this has already been mentioned. And I think this is such an interesting, or such a sort of powerful category. It uses irony, exaggeration, ridicule to expose, to criticize, you know, people's kind of vices, the stupidity. And this is particularly potent when you look at the context where it might be focused on, as Gehan has said, you know, in contemporary politics, but it might be any other kind of topical issue. And satire, I suppose, I think it has this like almost like a greater purpose as I think we might want to all agree on this panel, that it has this kind of constructive, it plays this role of kind of constructive social criticism within a society. And as I say, all these different types of humor, they might look at topical events, trends, they poke fun at well-known figures, they might look at tragedies, popular culture, elections, and so on. And they can take different formats. So it could be theatre, it could be stand-up, it could be political cartoons, memes, etc. And the third point I wanted to make is that what connects, I suppose, all of these, you know, what connects most people that write about humor, that sort of who theorize on it, is you know, what is the social function that humor serves? Because it's not just about entertainment. There's something very key to it, and this is where I think it gets, you know, particularly fascinating. Because humor is believed to help us engage in a certain sort of social action, by taking away simply, you know, that very awkward, uncomfortable unease that we as social beings, you know, have amongst ourselves. It is part of our being to be socially awkward. Like we're all familiar with, you know, the way someone might crack a joke, and it immediately diffuses a tense situation. So it has this ability to facilitate social interaction. And throughout history, humor has been used pretty much in that way. But humor has also, with that function, has also been used to kind of pass on or communicate a certain kind of knowledge. And you could call it knowledge, you could call it wisdom, you could call it an intelligence. And I wanted to just look at the dynamics of how that breaks down. if you think of a situation where a person slips on a banana skin, and it requires this sort of scenario, requires three people. So there's the person slipping on the banana skin, there's the person pointing to them and pointing to them doing this. And then there'll be a person who is next to the person pointing who will partake in laughing at this person who slipped on the banana skin. So there's that kind of dynamic set up, this kind of correlation between these three people. And the person who's making the joke, then there's the person who's the butt of the joke, who's being ridiculed and is very importantly unable to retaliate. They're kind of reduced, they're rendered kind of helpless in some way, and that allows us to laugh at them. And then there's this third person who joins in the laughter, and that in a way is this third person who might sometimes be seen as the audience. So there's this relational aspect to humor, and those who we have today understand that, and they might not understand it consciously, but it's there in their art. But when these power relations are thought about, we can understand how, just to move on from there, how that person slipping on the banana skin, this person who's the butt of the joke, can be replaced by other subjects. And you can put the person who slips in the banana skin to be a woman, a Black person, a politician. And that's how, in turn, we start to get this kind of development of essentially stereotypes. And when these power relationships thought about, I think we're really, the stereotype works on the basis that we're laughing at, as I said, someone's weakness, their difference. And humor, as theoreticians would say, is used to overcome these kinds of, taboos sometimes, or these social inhibitions to laugh at these people. They're very much about looking at things that are suppressed in our societies, and prejudices are obviously one of them. And one thing that theories on humor also talk about is that the general idea is that a person who laughs at the misfortunes of others is to be able to assert a kind of superiority to the shortcomings of somebody else. But what's very, I think, notable then is that when we laugh, therefore, at things like today and historically, it's going to change, because the stereotype is going to get replaced by something else. So we're not going to laugh today at Jewish people in the same way that you would have done in the 30s, but it gets replaced by somebody else who becomes the new kind of butt of the joke. But what's fascinating is when the stereotype starts to retaliate. And as a result of that, we get a resistance back to it. And that's when humor gets, starts to challenge these kind of the structure that I'm sort of trying to illustrate. And when humor, is repressed, it's also repressing this very important space of dissent and critique. And to have that suppressed is to eradicate that from a society. So I suppose to not so much to summarize, but humor has this ability to provide the space of critique, to relieve this tension, but it also connects us, and it does this sort of this dual role it plays. It conjoins and it divides us. And I think, those are just some of the things that I think maybe are helpful for thinking about how humor sort of functions in a more dissected form.
Thank you, Sharmini. Thank you so much. I think you've given a lot for us to think about in terms of the role of humor. And you made one interesting point that I want to go back to. You said that satire and humor, it has a greater purpose, especially satire, and that there's a social function, it can provide for constructive social criticism. So I'm going to pose the next question, reminding ourselves of that a little bit to Dino, and talking about the recent video article patient that UN Blok did. So you depict the Sri Lankan economy's downfall using comparing it to the physical deterioration of a patient at a hospital. And it's made in a way that it attempts to educate the large viewership you have across digital media platforms. Did you think of this as a priority? And if yes, could you tell us about how you facilitated this or thought of this educational approach, especially in this video?
Yeah, I think fundamentally how Gehan and I looked at it was the fact that we found a lot of the stats and figures that are put out there that usually indicate to a problem to be a little complex for normal or the layman to kind of, break down and understand. And it's kind of also demystifying subject areas that are sometimes that get a little too technical. For example, the economy, when you talk about what's happening, about things like reserves or what modern monetary theory is, it can somewhat sound a little too complex to understand. And if you want to really educate people about an issue, we felt it was really important to demystify those things. And that's why we kind of used a relatable setting in order to explain a situation and use these characters as possibly a big analogy in terms of explaining what's going on here and how that really relates to us. One thing we really thought of was also the fact that, when it comes to the younger generations in Sri Lanka, I feel there is this inherent, there's this inherent sense of like the fact that we don't want anything to do with politics or anything to do with, managing a country or policy, etc. So in terms of also relating to them and explaining to them that this is a problem that relates to you also, it needs to be somewhat demystified. And I think that really helped us connect with a larger audience group, because some of the comments we had were very interesting. Like there was a teacher who had shown the video to the class and said that this is something she wanted to use to educate her kids about the problem. And I think overall, when you look at the economic crisis also in Sri Lanka, a lot of people have educated themselves in general about economics and the problems they're facing and financial aspects of the country, etc., which is a good thing that came out of all the trouble we've been through. And I think like content that is out there that is presented in a more digestible form really helps people, bridge that gap faster. And also we've noticed like working with think tanks, like we were fortunate to work with Verite, they put a lot of work into it and they gave us a lot of stats and figures. But working with research-based organizations, I think what we were really able to help them do was also get the information they want to get out to the public more effectively. And I think that's a big problem a lot of think tanks and a lot of NGOs also struggle with in highlighting the problem first before trying to get to the solving of it. Because as soon as you can communicate the problem, the more attention there is to it, obviously, the more assistance you can get and more attention you can get to the problem in solving it. So I think the fact that we were able to demystify and also help them communicate the message they wanted to communicate to the audience they intended it to go to was a pretty big deal for us. So yeah, I think those are some of the ways in which we kind of used comedy to educate people about a very serious problem.
Thank you, Dino. I think that's a really interesting example and a helpful example to just further elaborate the points Sharmini made about the role of humor. And I'm going to ask Gihan a little bit, especially when working with the now going back to criticism. So socio-political commentary, what are the challenges you have had to face as a cartoonist and working with newspapers and working with media that has a very traditional history and then has now also moved on to online platforms where the cartoons are also posted on Facebook, on Instagram and various other platforms?
Yeah, so I think I have faced is more internal than external, and that is the struggle to come up in a newspaper setting.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. There's a small connection. Like.
Yeah. So what I was saying is yeah, what I was saying is that the biggest challenge is having to come up with, good content, good ideas, use good symbolism, get the message across well. And the challenge of working in a newspaper is that when you're working to a schedule, when you're working to deadlines, you can't always, you have to stick to those deadlines. You can't always wait for inspiration to hit. And you have to sometimes just churn out cartoons almost mechanically sometimes. And very often, due to those constraints and those limitations and those having to meet those deadlines, there have been numerous occasions where I have drawn and submitted cartoons which I myself am not happy with. So there is that problem. Then of course, as it's well known that in Sri Lanka we have had a long history of censorship, a long history of intimidation, a long history of violence against the media and media person. So having to work in that kind of an environment as well comes with its own challenges, and there is an element of hesitation sometimes. Okay, should I draw something about this particular leader, or should I jump into this topic, or should I comment on this, or should I hold back a bit? And there is an element of self-censorship and aspects that we go through as well, especially because when you work, I think the thing about a political cartoonist and an editorial cartoonist is we work in an editorial space, in a newspaper space, with fellow journalists, with editors, with sub-editors, and so we feel that pressure. We feel that we feel what's going on. So you kind of learn. You can never be 100% sure, but you kind of learn sometimes on what the boundaries are, and you sometimes have to maybe just push against the boundary in a kind of subtle way in order to survive. Yeah.
Thank you, Gihan. Just wanted to send a reminder to everyone also to post that you can send questions on the Q&A. We've already got a few really interesting questions. So coming back to, I think, what Gihan mentioned about censorship, and Gehan also mentioned about this a little bit, and especially in terms of with the examples that he mentioned of the videos that they worked on. I want to address my next question to Gehan and ask, so something that I have also noticed is that these rules of censorship do not apply across platforms. So if we compare newspapers, film, social media, we can see this difference, especially in Sri Lanka. So censorship may not be so stringent on social media, but like you said, there's an element of hate speech. And some political cartoonists are open to posting their cartoons online, but they may not be open to publishing it in a newspaper because of censorship rules that might apply to the newspapers. So I'm wondering if, Gehan, you could shed some light on this aspect as someone who works with digital media and as someone who works with YouTube.
So in terms of censorship, I think, I mean, because we own our platforms, because we own the pages we have, I think we have, I mean, we have more of a sense of freedom than everyone else. We can say or do anything we want. But if someone actually flags something inappropriate, the video gets taken down now instantly. So like say TikTok or Instagram or anything. Someone can go and say, like, for example, even if we are making fun of a character, say, for example, Arthik Patient, they're making fun of the central bank governor. And if he put a TikTok out, I mean, he could get someone or a whole bunch of people to go and report the video saying, look, this is a character sort of assassination on me. So please kind of take it down. And then like, for example, TikTok will take it down and actually would flag your profile for harassment as well. So currently those issues are also there on all these platforms. But having said that, we still have more, like I mentioned, we have more freedom because we own the platforms or the pages or the following we have, we control it. It's our own media. So because of that, we have more freedom and less censorship. But for example, if we are performing this, like obviously we do more stuff just other than just the videos, we do stand-up comedy as well. And in Sri Lanka, if you are performing to an audience of say 500 to 600 people at the Lionel event, you have to always go to the censor board and get a censor board approval. That is a must. If you don't do that, you can't sell tickets. You can have a free event. You can ask 1,000 people to come free, but you can't charge them money or something like that. But because if you charge for a ticket, you have to get a censor board license. So even if we do like a stand-up comedy show, we have to go through that process. So those elements are there when it comes to censorship, but more or less we have more freedom because it's our sort of platforms. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, for sure. I think it's also working across these mediums helps you kind of, and with experience you learn how to kind of navigate these rules and find ways to do things. And
For sure.
like you said before, also to walk that very thin line sometimes.
Yeah, and because we work with like certain brands, like I said, for our videos, there is a level of, we self-censor ourselves as well, because I mean, obviously, for example, you can't swear. We don't, because it's for a brand and reflects poorly on the brand. But when it comes to stand-up, I mean, it's you can say or do whatever you want. So it's a different ball game, and that sort of humor is completely different. It's that is probably the sort of best mode of comedy, because I would say it has zero censorship. You can say whatever the hell you want. You can say it at that moment, and and then wait for the consequences after. But yeah, stand up is definitely the less censored version of comedy, I would say. There is no censorship at all.
I think that's, yeah, thank you, Gehan. And we have quite, I think in the Q&A, we have some questions that address some of the things that you have mentioned. So we'll come back to that. To Sharmini, I think, again, thinking of censorship, I want to ask you, we know of artists like Aubrey Collette from the 43 group in Sri Lankan local modern art history, who also used humor for specific political messaging in the 1940s, 50s, and he had to go into self-exile to Australia due to the large amounts of hostility and criticism he received in response to his work. What changes would you like to see now, 8 years after Collette, in terms of the relationship between humor and art in Sri Lanka?
I mean, with Collette, it's sadly true that as a result of his work, he was, as you say, forced into exile. Collette was a, he created work which was standalone drawings and paintings, but he also created work which were editorial cartoons in the ilk of Gehan, working at the newspapers. In fact, Aubrey Collette had a job as a political cartoonist at the Times of Ceylon in 1946, and it was a position he held right up until he was forced to leave in the 1960s. And yes, thanks for showing you some works here, which are actually all part of a book that he put together called Ceylon Since Solbury, Part 1. He never made a Part 2, and it's called A History of Cartoons by Collette. So I think we're experiencing them in a different way to Gehan's work in the newspaper. It's not surrounded by the other journalistic, reporting. So this is a book in itself. And you know, when we think about censorship, you know, when it's published in this format, it's a much easier target to go for the book and remove it or destroy it. This book was never censored, and just to kind of look a little bit more closely at some of the content. You know, just at maybe Colette's style a little bit. You know, here, you know, Colette would work in the manner of, you know, looking at looking at the exaggerating physical characteristics to be able, we can always identify somebody, but he'll always, you know, make a caricature of them. He'd often do something else, which he often would label using text. He'd label the people, who will label an object in this way to kind of create this identification with it. You know, and in that way, I think he's also employing symbolism for these larger concepts, larger ideas. And he would combine caricature and irony. And then this particular work, I like a lot. It's, you know, it's sort of this group of people on the edge of a mountain, where there's a group that stand on top. And I think that figure right there holding onto the rope is J.R. Jawadana, and he's got his initials written on his pocket of his shirt. And then down the rope, there's a group of people hanging above this water, and the water has that text written on it, you know, communal chaos. And the cartoon's looking at the language commission, showing how, you know, there's different he characterizes the different men from their respective language speaking groups trying to climb up this rope. And this is thinking about English as the link language being snipped off here. And then some of the other ones from the book, again, actually it's interesting that what Gihan said is, you know, what makes a successful cartoon. I really agree too that it has kind of this, you know, it has validity, you know, beyond the time in which it was made. This one, Paper Chase from 13th of December 1946, and that text at the bottom, it says the Auditor General found it extremely difficult to get suitable answers from the ex-Civil Defense Commissioner for some 697 queries on wartime expenditure. I mean, how have things changed? It just feels like this talks to us so much today. And if you go to the next one, it's curious because we didn't compare what we were going to put up, but Gihan, you had your images up of the two works from 2011, I think, of the fish, and then here's one and then 2021, and this is looking at taxation, you know, and again this sort of I don't know if it's a dolphin, sorry, I'm not very good at identifying fish, but this sort of fish, which is again J.R. Jawadana caricatured as a fish, and with this person in a boat, and you know, complaining about the cost of living too. And what Colette was very, very much in favor of you know, bringing attention to was this average man, the average person. And then in the last one here, we see it again, and it's, you know, where, you know, what has changed, and how, you know, he's looking here at all of the things that always come up, you know, that are promised by politicians, you know, all the grandiose schemes as he's talking about here, to win votes, and then here there's a person behind bars, you know, the common person, not you know, the average man receiving few benefits. I mean, I think, to go back to what, you know, asking me about censorship, you know, in the case of Colette, yeah, I mean, he was a journalist in many ways too, but using cartoons, and he really scrutinized the political elite in a way that, you know, he would be someone who tried to speak the truth, and that was what Gihan also mentioned. But he paid a price. But you know, there's an element, maybe one would say, that journalism, journalists, they need to be fearless, they need to be independent, and I think Colette was both, or trying to be both. and he was willing to expose injustice and corruption at no cost. That was what his job was. He tried to be, I think, as much as possible non-partisan. But as I say, he paid the price in his family life. You know, his family life fell apart, and as well as professionally. When he left Sri Lanka, he never really worked properly in the way I'd say that he would have wanted to as a political cartoonist. He continued cartooning, but I think, you know, it's a travesty that we lost someone like that. And if there was any sense of justice, perhaps to think about what happened and where we are now, I think I wanted to just end on perhaps, you know, a point Dino made about there is this educational, quality of Colette's work where, you know, if you looked at this, if you had this one book on the curriculum for history, I think it would be absolutely amazing how much a generation learning about history in Sri Lanka post-independence would glean from it, because it's so specific, again, to a local context and things that were being talked about and said. And again, you know, seeing how it was then to even, you know, how things have not changed. And of course, the study of Colette's, I think, you know, in itself for art history is important. But I do think that there's an additional value for him within an educational environment as well, when we want to think about our history.
Thank you, Sharmini. And I think, I mean, working at the museum also, we've looked at Colette's work, because we've had his work in both our exhibitions. And I think this is something we've discussed as well, how important it is for this, for humor and especially cartoons to be represented in the curriculum, to be included in the curriculum. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we have quite a few questions in the Q&A. So I'll start directing a few of them. So the first one I'll ask Dino. So the question is that there's a strong marketing and advertising element to many of your videos and content. What do you think about when incorporating your sponsors into your content in a meaningful way?
There is a strong marketing element to the video, but we also try to have some kind of socio-political commentary in our videos consciously, to also talk a little bit about what's going on in the times we're in, and also how we perceive things and how we interpret things depending on who we are or what our background is, etc. For example, like, I mean, Gehan spoke a lot about taking on brands that have been targeted by racists or bigoted individuals. I mean, it takes a lot sometimes for you to also put your name on the line and take that step in supporting them, because a lot of the time these brands need support. We've also done things where, in kind of breaking down class denominations, we did a video for a tea brand where we championed the tea guy, which usually doesn't happen in most videos. They're kind of, you know, they're an extra that is part of the story, but not necessarily the protagonist. And we've done the same thing in multiple ways. We did another video with regard to this elderly lady, and the children come to visit her. And we had that conversation most people don't have, and it's kind of swept under the rug when parents get older, how kids try to take advantage of parents in order to, you know, get benefits. And in that we champion the lady. So I think when you're doing a brand story and you're doing something a little different to a traditional advertisement, what at least we try to do is take you on a bit of a journey that has elements we talk about with things that are currently going on, and also things that we need to think about as people or as part of the societies we are in as much as we talk about a brand and its payoff. Another really good example to that, or some of the work we've done, is with regard to even a post the Easter Sunday attacks. We did some organic content also with it was called Punchi Dupate Katava, the story of a little island, where we spoke about the potential outcomes of what could happen if we go down this path of, you know, responding to fire with fire instead of trying to have a conversation and understanding each other. So I think there are many ways to add meaning. We try to do it through subtle narratives. Sometimes there are subliminal even, sometimes there are more pronounced than others. And in that sense, we try to tackle these kind of very, very rough spots or rough conversations. But yeah, I think that would be the best way to summarize it.
Yeah, thank you, Dino. There's another question which I'll direct to Gehan Blok. So there's a question asking, I think the two questions, they're quite similar also, but I'll ask this. How do you navigate appealing to the widest denomination of the public in your work while avoiding repeating misogynist, discriminatory or classist ideas or language in your work? Very, a big question. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, if the person who asked that question, you can go and watch all our videos on our YouTube channel, and it's very evident that we usually try to not play the gallery. If you watch all our videos, you'll understand. We always try to not be sexist. We always try to champion underdogs in all our videos. Like Dino mentioned, for example, we even did a video for Huawei called The Bad Cop. It's about this prefect who basically misuses his power. And if you watch it and if you try and read in between the lines, you'll understand that it's also directed at people with power. It's not just, it's not just an advertisement. It's not just advertainment or whatever we call it. It also has a message. So we are actually helping the brand as well as doing something which actually helps our social conscience as well. So if you check most of our videos, we try to stay away from the norm. Like I mentioned, the Pick Me video, for example, we took it on because whereas no other YouTuber at that particular time, because that's when I think things were pretty bad. It was 2018 or 2019, I can't remember. This whole anti-Muslim rhetoric was like huge. We actually had tackled two brands. One brand was Pick Me, and then we took on No Limit as well. And both brands are perceived to be this whole, it's Muslim brands, don't buy from them. If you go even today to that particular video which we did for No Limit, which has like 3 million organic views or whatever, most of the comments you can filter down saying, I will never ever go to No Limit, right? But that was in 2019 when we released it, or 2020, I can't remember. 2019. But if you go and see some of the comments in 2022, you can see how those people have changed. It's a clear depiction of how the Hatanamalakshi people also have changed now. So that was a huge win for me and for Dino to see those comments, the same racist, bigoted, fascist mofos coming back. And actually people who have a bit of a conscience coming back and saying, dang No Limit and all those idiots who commented saying you'll never step into a No Limit, coming back to say, God, I was an idiot in 2019. So if you go see those comments, it's actually very fulfilling for a creator to see people come around after what they did in 2019. So so those are the small wins we get. So we try to always not play to the gallery. We always try to be different. So yeah, that's how we challenge the norm.
Yeah. Thank you, Gehan. There's a question to Gihan. So journalists and media personnel, we've covered this a little bit in the main panel, but I think the question is more directed to you and your approach of developing content, keeping recent scrutiny and criticism directed towards journalists and media personnel.
Yeah, I think it's just there's always an element of risk. And like I said before, we kind of push against the boundary and try to figure out what is like what we can depict and what might be dangerous to depict. And there are certain examples. Things also don't remain static. Like, for example, when I started drawing cartoons, the Hello Rumia had just entered politics, and there were several Buddhist monks who were MPs in parliament at the time. And then the whole question was, okay, because until then it was kind of not acceptable to depict Buddhist monks in cartoons. And so there was a lot of discussion about this, and we kind of decided, okay, fine, we'll just if you want to comment on the politics of what's happening with regards to this party, we'll just show the party symbol, which was the conch at that time. So we use that as we use the party symbol as opposed to the sivura. But then as time moved on, we slowly, there would be a few cartoons where maybe just an arm of a Buddhist monk with a bit of a sivura showing, we would draw it. And, that would be passed and that would be shown. And like that gradually, and now I think I'm seeing more and more cartoonists drawing Buddhist monks in the political context. So things evolve, things change, things move forward, things move back. You have to have your ear to the ground. You have to listen, pick up on all kinds of different things that we hear. But there's always in Sri Lanka, there's always an element of there's always a risk. And also, I think one more thing, and that is that the threats don't only come from the people in power or the state. Especially after drawing cartoons on social media, you see a lot of people passing very threatening comments to cartoonists on their social media platforms. And even like a very touchy subject, interestingly, is cricket. Like one of my colleagues, Nama Lamarasinghe, he drew a cartoon about a cricket match being held during the pandemic. And he got really attacked badly for that by cricket fans. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Gihan. And I think that is perhaps, I think, what keeps journalists and media personnel hopeful, also knowing and understanding that things move forward and things evolve, and keep creators going. I will direct the next question to Sharmini. If there's a question asking, how do ethics figure into satire and humorous content? Should there be any red lines, or does that defeat the purpose of content that tries to push boundaries? Others can also weigh in. I think, yeah, Sharmini, if you can.
Well, I guess, I don't know who said it, but, the world is not going to be destroyed by those that are evil or perform evil. It will be destroyed by those who watch and do nothing. And I think people who are willing to raise their hand and make sketches, touch thorny subjects like Gehan and Dino Blok, are people who are trying actually to look at things in another way, because the common way of looking at them makes it just too difficult. We can't go there to have a conversation about race. We can't go there to have a conversation about Muslims. So the humor is such an important part, therefore, of having that conversation. It's another means. So the ethics around it, I think, is as far as those who use humor, how far they want to go with it. And I think they are the producers of it. They are the script writers, the content producers. And those are decisions that they make. And whether, if it's in the context of a newspaper, there will be things that maybe that newspaper is not willing to accept. And that would be an argument internally, as Gehan has said, would come within the newspaper, the editorial kind of viewpoint. I think it was, Gehan's mentioned with Dino Blok, there's sort of more room for them to kind of talk about thornier subjects, feeling less censored when they're working on a YouTube platform. I think what happens when we, I think it's troubling to think about ethics. I feel that humor is kind of almost anti-ethical, because it's kind of trying to say that we need to have this conversation and we're going to use humor to do it. And I think where the clashes come is that when, as I said in some of what I was saying earlier, we share our humor within with the communities that we're a part of. And so if we're not from that community or that culture, we don't understand the nuances of that humor, and we see it very literally. And that's where you're going to get, people taking huge offense to something. And so where humor can manage to kind of break down barriers and connect across things which are harder to speak about, it can also be the subject, as we've seen, across history, but, particularly in the media, where people find it, really, they'll say that's not funny, it's just distasteful. And what, the earlier question about somebody saying whether, there's a kind of way in which you to avoid being classist or racist or misogynist, etc. I think Dino and Blok are working with, they're working at a time now where the subjects of humor, which used to be really misogynistic, audiences and the general public have said, and the content producers of humor have said, no, we're just not going to accept that. So it's because of that humor coming in, we now recognize, those stereotypes have also been, we don't use them. We've understood why they are misogynistic. They've played that role.
Yeah, thank you, Sharmini. Dino, Gihan, if you guys want to add anything.
No, I think Sharmini pretty much covered it. I think one of the things also is, and it's especially if you look at stand-up comedians even internationally, I think it's one of the biggest things I grapple with in terms of, like I said, like your audiences are getting more and more polarized today. And they're also getting more and more opinionated because they're stuck in their own echo chambers with people who see things the way they see things. And I think that's predominantly due to algorithms and social media. And then what happens is that when you take a joke too far, it's constantly at debate. And I think that depends a lot on the audience as much as the performer. I feel far too often is the performer singled out as somebody being responsible for something happening, whereas I think somebody who partakes in that as an audience member also, it depends on their sensitivities and what they find funny, their individual history, their shared history, their cultural background. There are so many factors that kind of ultimately lead to the factors as to whether a joke is found funny or not, if I'm just to oversimplify. So it's really hard to, have a joke that pleases everyone without it sometimes being overly sanitized or overly kind of sugar-coated. Sometimes the thorniness is what makes it really funny. And for example, like the banana peel joke that was brought up, I mean, somebody's physically falling and could potentially hurt themselves. But there's a humor in that, and we laugh at that simply because it's something funny that happened. But does that mean that we shouldn't laugh at people who fall? That's a big question mark. So like these are sometimes very philosophical questions that go in that philosophical realm of what humor is and what should or should not be a joke, or what makes a joke funny or what doesn't. And it's really hard to answer, to be very honest.
Thank you, Dino. There's another really interesting question to, I think, Dino, Gehan, and Gihan. So asking, so all three of you have a strong background in theater. How has this background influenced the work that you are doing in humor? Gihan, if you want to start.
Yeah, so
yeah.
yeah, I think for me it has been, when it comes to acting, we adopt this approach called, because we're acting on stage and we're depicting a character, we use this approach called believable exaggeration. So you have to kind of, there has to be a little bit of exaggeration in your acting, but it also has to be believable and stay true to the character. So how I think I have used that for my cartoons is that cartoons is an exaggerated medium. It is but what I try to do is through that I still try to remain believable and credible to the situation that I'm depicting, and I don't try to distort it too much.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I have learned from theater, like and cartooning.
Thank you. Gehan, yeah.
For us, I think, I mean, I started theater straight out of school, and the first few plays I did were all comedies. So that's where I learned comic timing, when there's an audience, to wait for laughs. All those things are things you didn't learn whenever you performed in school. Like, I mean, it happened, but you didn't know the techniques of it. You didn't understand that you had to wait for a joke. You didn't understand how to deliver a punchline. So all those things actually came to be, being part of comedies and being part of place like Pussadilla, where there was like massive crowds, who were laughing for every single joke we were performing. So for us, I think I speak on behalf of Dino also. For us, how it helped was, especially when you became a stand-up comic, the things you learned on stage, especially when we performed in like comedies, we took to the stand-up realm as well. To wait for jokes, to control an audience, to make them laugh. I mean, that the to have that much control over an audience is just it's crazy. Sometimes you are in awe that you can do that. So those sort of skills are the things that we took from theater, to what we do now. So we know exactly, okay, this sort of line, this sort of punchline, this sort of pause, this sort of reaction, this sort of situation would actually invoke laughter, get people to laugh. So we know exactly after years of doing that. So that's how it has helped us.
Thank you. I think by virtue of that, you've answered the next question as well. How would you advise someone who is interested in performing traditional stand-up, especially performing in front of crowds on stage? If you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think Gehan covered most of it, but I do think if you really want to get into stand-up comedy, because Sri Lanka doesn't have a dive bar culture, we don't have comedy clubs. That the culture is kind of just starting off here. We got into it quite by happenstance, and I think the best way to start is, if you want to do stand-up comedy, you need to learn to work a crowd, and the best way to learn to work a crowd is to do theater. I would say predominantly comedy. Like Gehan mentioned, you understand how to time yourself, how to pace yourself, how to set up a joke, how to make a joke, how to lengthen a joke in terms of staggering it so that you can actually generate more humor. So a lot of that, and the physicality of comedy, all of that can be easily learned through theater. I think both of us, we were also journalists. So the fact that we were also in the news, or dealing with the news on a daily basis, helped us also understand about connecting issues and what's going on in Sri Lanka to some of the things we were dealing with. So I think all of these things influenced our journey to stand up. So there's no set way, but I think a genuine, really good start, especially if you're afraid of performing in front of crowds, would be to perform in some production, even a small role, or be part of a theatrical production, would really help get past that stage fright and those initial jitters, in order to speak to a crowd and perform in front of a crowd. I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
also,
Yeah.
I think with stand-up and performance, I think you need to bomb, you need to fail, because that's when you realize, okay, this is what I was.
Yeah.
Because the first sort of stand-up thing I tried was this event for at the Royal Club, the golf club, for about like 200 people. I mean, this is like, I'm talking a decade ago. I tried to copy someone's stuff off the internet, and I went and performed it, and I bombed so bad. There were like 5 people listening to me while 205 people ate, drank, and didn't pay attention. I went to the washroom, and one of the uncles there came to the washroom and was like, "Son, I don't think this is your thing. Maybe you should find another career option." And it actually killed my confidence. I didn't do stand up for about 6 years, and after that clip went viral, and it took off. But that's the thing. You got to do it. You got to fail. You got to bomb, and then you realize, okay, maybe don't copy someone else's work. Do your own shit. And when you do your own shit, it actually works.
Yeah, I think it comes from a deeply personal place also. Stand up, what Gehan is mentioning is quite right. Like, it's your experiences. So when you try to talk about things that you can't really relate to, or can't talk about things that really happened to you, sometimes how genuine it is really comes across when you know what you're talking about, or you've experienced what you're talking about. So I think connecting with an audience, failing, all of those things really teach you also what you need to know. Theatre is a great place to do all of that.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Jonathan, I'm hoping, so Jonathan has asked about censorship and how it has made, how it has inspired creativity and innovation in him. I think Gehan actually gave quite a few good examples when he answered that question previously. So, Jonathan, I hope we answered that, we covered that. Because we are running out of time, wish we could answer more questions. I want to thank all our panelists for joining us today, all our participants for joining us, and this marks the end of Support Local Art, the talk series edition 2. I also want to thank everyone in the behind the scenes, Sharmi from our team, Tinal from our team for helping us, and to Sharmini, to Sandev, to everybody who has helped curate this series and to take this far. And I hope everyone continues to engage with the topics that we have covered. And on behalf of the museum, I would also like to thank Saskia Fernando Gallery and Nations Trust Private Banking for their support. Also, do keep in touch with the public programs and exhibitions of the museum. We currently have Encounters, our second exhibition up, and you can come and view the exhibition. You can also follow us on our social media and website to get to know more about the programs, exhibitions, and other initiatives that we do. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
guys.
much.
See you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
See you.